The coastal breeze of Mystic, Connecticut carried the faint scent of salt water as the town basked in the golden glow of an autumn afternoon. At the historic Seabreeze Manor, family and friends gathered to celebrate the wedding of Ethan Caldwell and Amelia Grant. The estate, perched above the rugged shore, exuded timeless charm, reflecting the couple's picture-perfect romance, or so it seemed. Ethan, tall and composed, stood at the altar, his hazel eyes softened by a mix of joy and nervousness. Amelia, radiant in her gown, walked down the aisle with a quiet grace, her smile betraying both joy and anxiety. Together, they seemed like the perfect couple, young, accomplished, and deeply in love. Yet beneath the surface, an unseen tension lingered. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with heartfelt vows and tender promises. Guests dabbed at their eyes, moved by Ethan's words, while Amelia's voice quivered as she reciprocated. But as they exchanged rings, Ethan's hand faltered for a brief moment, just long enough for a faint shadow to fall over the day's perfection. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the celebration continued, with a lavish reception in the ballroom of Seabreeze Manor. The soft glow of chandeliers and the sounds of live jazz filled the air. Toasts were made, laughter echoed, and the clinking of champagne glasses punctuated the evening. Amelia, glowing but slightly uneasy, basked in the attention, though her glances toward Ethan hinted at something beneath the surface. Ethan, normally confident and assured, began to withdraw. He excused himself more than once, stepping out onto the terrace to gaze at the crashing waves below. Each time his posture seemed tense, as though carrying a burden too heavy to share. As the evening wore on, Amelia noticed Ethan's growing silence. When he slipped away to get some air, her smile faded. Her unease deepened as minutes stretched into 30, then 45. A chill began to spread across the ballroom as whispers circulated. The groom had disappeared. Amelia's heart pounded as she excused herself to search for him. A waiter had seen him heading toward the cliffs near the water, but he hadn't returned. Guests murmured, and flashlights soon flickered into the night as the search began. In that moment, the fairy tale shattered. A single question hung in the air. What could make a man disappear on his wedding night? The perfect day, full of promise and joy, was unraveling into a mystery. The moon hung low over Mystic's jagged coastline, its pale light casting an eerie glow on a night that would haunt all who had witnessed it. The festive glow of Seabreeze Manor faded as confusion settled over the gathering. The cheerful chatter of the reception turned into murmurs of concern. Ethan Caldwell, the groom, had not returned from his brief departure to get some air. What had begun as an idyllic celebration was rapidly turning into a nightmare. Amelia Grant stood frozen in the ballroom, her champagne flute trembling in her hand. The words of the waiter echoed in her mind. Ethan had been seen heading toward the cliffs. Panic surged in her chest. Her wedding gown, once a symbol of joy, now felt constricting. Guests whispered, their glances turning sharp, and the weight of their curiosity pressed down on her. At first, family members and staff reassured her, suggesting he might have just been overwhelmed by the day's events. But as minutes turned into 30, then 45, Amelia's worry deepened into something more unsettling. She excused herself, stepping outside into the cold night air in search of her husband. The cliffs were eerily silent, save for the distant crash of waves below. Flashlights pierced the darkness as a small search party, comprising Ethan's brother Peter, a few groomsmen, and a security guard, spread out along the rocky paths. Their calls for Ethan echoed, but each unanswered cry heightened the tension. Inside the ballroom, the remaining guests lingered uneasily, unsure whether to wait or leave. The live music had stopped, replaced by an uncomfortable quiet. Amelia's best friend, Natalie, tried to comfort her, but her words did little to ease the growing dread. By midnight, the vibrant reception had devolved into chaos. Amelia, her mascara streaked with tears, paced the grounds, clutching Ethan's jacket, which she had found draped over a bench near the cliffs. She replayed their last moments together in her mind. Was there something she had missed? A sign that she hadn't seen? Peter returned from the search, his face grim. No sign of him. It's like he just vanished. The cold words struck Amelia like a blow. The realization sank in. Something was terribly wrong. When the police arrived at 1 a.m., their calm professionalism offered little comfort. Officer Miles Harrington surveyed the scene with a hardened expression. After speaking briefly with Amelia, he ordered a more formal search of the area. His reassurances felt empty. No one could deny the growing sense of dread. As the night wore on and the temperature dropped, Amelia's hope dwindled. The once beautiful surroundings of Seabreeze Manor now felt suffocating, their charm overshadowed by an overwhelming fear. The cliffs, once a picturesque backdrop for photos, now loomed as a dark, ominous reminder of the unknown. As the first light of dawn broke, Ethan's absence had become more than just a mystery. It was a chilling enigma. Amelia and everyone present were left with only one question. Where had he gone and why? The faint light of dawn barely penetrated the dark sky as Amelia stood motionless near the cliffs, watching the police continue their search. The wedding that had brought everyone together now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the grim reality of her husband's disappearance. Ethan Caldwell, her new husband of mere hours, had vanished without a trace. Detective Miles Harrington, known for his methodical approach and unshakable demeanor, arrived at the scene. His weathered face revealed little emotion as he took in the surroundings. The jacket left behind on the bench, the scuff marks on the trail leading to the cliffs, and the half-empty champagne flute abandoned on the railing. Every detail seemed out of place, as if the very essence of the celebration had been wiped away by an eerie calm. A search of the immediate area was ordered, and Harrington's mind began to work in overdrive. Newlyweds didn't just disappear, and the unease gnawing at him only grew with every minute that passed. Deputy Jenna Lewis, his younger partner, joined him near the cliffs. The area had been thoroughly searched, but there were no signs of a struggle. The terrain, treacherous as it was, made it possible that Ethan had wandered too close to the edge, though it seemed unlikely given his experience. Still, it was a possibility they couldn't disregard. Amelia, wrapped in a shawl offered by a guest, approached Harrington, her eyes filled with desperation. Her wedding gown, now a symbol of sorrow, weighed heavily on her shoulders. She looked at him, searching his face for answers, but Harrington's expression remained focused and calm. He began to ask her about the events leading up to Ethan's disappearance. Amelia's recollections painted the picture of a groom who had been distracted, more so than she had noticed before. He had mentioned needing some air, and that was the last time she saw him. By mid-morning, the search expanded beyond the cliffs. Officers canvassed the surrounding area, speaking with staff, guests, and locals, trying to piece together Ethan's last known movements. Meanwhile, Harrington and Lewis worked side by side, gathering fragments of information that might lead to something bigger. A key clue came from the valet at Seabreeze Manor. He recalled seeing Ethan walking toward the parking lot shortly after leaving the reception. Moments later, the valet noticed a black sedan driving away. The valet couldn't identify the driver, but the appearance of the car sparked new questions. If Ethan had left in a car, it meant he wasn't alone, or that he had planned to leave on his own. The investigation took another turn when Ethan's phone was found in the front seat of his car, but it provided little insight. There were no calls or messages indicating distress, but a quick scan of the call log revealed something unusual, a number that had been dialed several times in the week leading up to the wedding. The number was unregistered, and Harrington made a mental note to trace it. As the day wore on, the investigation began to reveal more unsettling details. Ethan was a successful urban planner, well regarded in his field with no apparent enemies or legal troubles. His life had seemed stable, promising. Yet as the investigation continued, inconsistencies emerged. Some guests described Ethan as affectionate toward Amelia, while others recalled moments when he appeared distant, preoccupied. One guest even mentioned overhearing him on the phone during the reception, his tone tense, as if he was speaking with someone he didn't want to be. Amelia, too, became a focal point of the investigation. Her grief appeared genuine, but small inconsistencies in her account raised questions. Why had she waited so long to raise the alarm? Why did she seem composed when the search began? The investigation grew more complex as news came in from a gas station attendant in a neighboring town. He recognized Ethan from a photo shown during the canvassing and confirmed that Ethan had been there the night before, buying a bottle of water and filling up a car. His behavior had seemed odd considering the circumstances, suggesting that Ethan had left Seabreeze Manor willingly, but his intentions remained unclear. As the sun set once more over Mystic, the small town seemed to hold its breath. What had started as a joyful celebration was unraveling into a mystery with too many unanswered questions. Detective Harrington stood by the cliffs, gazing at the darkening waters below. One thing was certain: this was no ordinary disappearance. Detective Miles Harrington stared out at the restless waves, his thoughts racing as he tried to make sense of Ethan Caldwell's disappearance. The more he learned, the more it became clear that this was no ordinary case. A man didn't simply vanish on his wedding night, not without a reason. Every piece of evidence seemed to point to something deeper, something darker. The investigation so far had turned up few answers. Ethan's last known movements were contradictory. A groom caught smiling for photos, toasting with guests, then suddenly disappearing into the night. The image of a content, carefree man was beginning to crack. Harrington's first stop had been to speak with Ethan's closest confidants. Peter Caldwell, Ethan's older brother, had been reluctant to share anything that might make his brother look suspicious, but his reluctance soon gave way to some troubling revelations. Peter admitted that in the weeks leading up to the wedding, Ethan had seemed unusually anxious. It had been brushed off as pre-wedding nerves, but now, looking back, Peter wondered if there had been something more. When pressed further, Peter revealed a crucial detail. Ethan had mentioned discovering something troubling about Amelia, though he hadn't elaborated. He had only said that he would handle it, but Peter could tell it was weighing heavily on him. This revelation reframed the entire investigation. Could Ethan's disappearance be linked to something he had discovered about his bride? And if so, what kind of secret could have driven him to leave his own wedding? Amelia Grant's behavior was under scrutiny as well. Her grief appeared genuine, but Harrington noticed inconsistencies in her account. While she claimed that Ethan had been perfectly fine before the wedding, brushing off any concerns as groundless, she had seemed oddly composed when the search began. When asked about the moments leading up to Ethan's disappearance, her answers were brief, almost rehearsed. The cracks in her story were becoming harder to ignore. Deputy Jenna Lewis dug deeper into Amelia's background, and what she uncovered was startling. Amelia Grant was not her real name. She had once been known as Clara Donovan. The discovery hit like a thunderclap. Clara Donovan had been involved in a scandal 10 years earlier surrounding the sudden death of her stepfather, Jonathan Hayes, a wealthy investor from Savannah. The official cause of death had been an accidental fall from a staircase during a late-night argument with Clara, but rumors of foul play had haunted the case. Shortly after the investigation fizzled out, Clara had disappeared. Now, as Amelia Grant, she had rebuilt her life far from the gossip of Savannah's elite, but her past had followed her. The revelation of her former identity raised troubling questions. Had she changed her name to escape scrutiny, or had she done so to bury something far more sinister? Harrington and Lewis dug deeper, uncovering more unsettling details. Financial records showed that Amelia had inherited a significant sum from her stepfather's estate, which she had used to start her gallery business in Mystic. The timing of the inheritance was suspicious, as it coincided with her move to Mystic and the start of her new life. The money was more than enough to raise questions about her true motivations. Harrington's gut told him that Ethan had been on the verge of discovering something explosive, something that had either driven him to run or put him in harm's way. And now, with Amelia's hidden past coming to light, it seemed that the stakes were even higher. The discovery of Ethan's journal added another layer of intrigue. Hidden in his office, the journal contained cryptic entries written in the weeks leading up to the wedding. One in particular stood out. "The truth will destroy everything. I have to decide if I can live with it or if I have to walk away." Harrington studied the words closely, his mind racing. What truth had Ethan uncovered, and why had he kept it to himself until the wedding day? A breakthrough came when Lewis tracked down an old acquaintance of Clara Donovan's, an ex-neighbor who remembered the scandal surrounding her stepfather's death. The neighbor confirmed that there had been suspicions of foul play, but that the case had been quietly closed due to the power and influence of the Hayes family. Armed with this new perspective, Harrington returned to Amelia with more pointed questions. She denied any involvement in her stepfather's death, insisting she had been a victim of rumors and gossip. She claimed she had changed her name to escape the past, to start over. But as Harrington left the interview, doubt lingered. Amelia's tears seemed genuine, but her story still didn't add up. One thing was clear: Amelia Grant, or Clara Donovan, wasn't telling the whole truth. The deeper they dug, the more the investigation shifted. What had started as a missing person case was now revealing itself as a web of lies, each thread leading closer to a truth no one wanted to face. Detective Harrington sat in his office, surrounded by the scattered papers of Amelia Grant's past. The more he dug into Clara Donovan's history, the clearer it became that this woman, now known as Amelia, was hiding far more than she let on. Each new discovery seemed to connect her to a darker, more complicated narrative, and Harrington couldn't ignore the feeling that they were getting closer to something explosive. Amelia's admission about her former identity as Clara Donovan had shaken the investigation to its core. While she insisted that her name change had been an attempt to escape baseless accusations, the evidence suggested otherwise. Amelia had meticulously reconstructed her life, severing all ties to her past in Savannah. The transformation had been impressive, but it raised a troubling question. What had she been so desperate to leave behind? Harrington's focus shifted to the events surrounding Jonathan Hayes' death. Officially, the death had been ruled an accident, an unfortunate fall down the stairs during a heated argument with Clara. But the rumors surrounding his death were persistent, fueled by whispers of foul play. It wasn't hard to see why. Jonathan Hayes had been a prominent businessman with powerful connections, and his death had left many questions unanswered. The timing of his death was also suspicious. Just weeks after the inheritance was finalized, Clara had disappeared, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. The authorities had closed the case quietly, and with the influence of the Hayes family, it had been swept under the rug. But for those who had known the family, the silence felt more like a cover-up than a resolution. Amelia's denial of any involvement in Jonathan's death was adamant. She claimed to have loved him, though her voice faltered under Harrington's scrutiny. The contradictions in her story were becoming harder to ignore. Deputy Lewis had uncovered more disturbing evidence. Financial records linked Clara Donovan to a series of shell companies tied to Jonathan's estate. The transactions weren't large, but the timing was undeniable. They aligned with significant moments in her life. Her move to Mystic, the opening of her gallery, and even her engagement to Ethan. Harrington's mind raced as he pieced the puzzle together. Had Amelia manipulated her way into Mystic's tight-knit community, using her charm and artistic talent to hide her past? And had Ethan, in his search for the truth, discovered something that had put him in danger? The breakthrough came when Harrington found Ethan's journal, which contained more cryptic entries. One stood out. I can't ignore what I've found, but if I confront her, what happens next? She's not the person I thought she was. But do I love her anyway? Harrington's heart sank as he realized the full extent of Ethan's inner turmoil. Ethan had known something about Amelia's past, and it had torn him apart. But what had Ethan found? And why hadn't he confronted her before the wedding? The search for answers took another turn when Lewis tracked down a former employee of Jonathan Hayes'. The man, now living in Florida, reluctantly recalled the events of that fateful night. He remembered the heated argument between Clara and Jonathan, the crash that followed, and the chaotic scene when he arrived at the stairs to find Jonathan dead. The man's account didn't prove foul play, but it added weight to the theory that Jonathan's death had been more than just an accident. Amelia's response when confronted with these revelations was telling. She insisted that she had loved Jonathan, but her emotions seemed rehearsed, as though she were trying to convince herself as much as anyone else. It was clear to Harrington that Amelia's story was crumbling, piece by piece. As the investigation continued, the stakes grew higher. Ethan's disappearance was no longer just a mystery. It was part of a much larger, more dangerous game. The more Harrington uncovered, the more the lines between victim and perpetrator began to blur. And with each passing day, the truth seemed more elusive than ever. The deeper Detective Harrington delved into the mystery surrounding Ethan Caldwell's disappearance, the more tangled the web became. The cryptic journal entries, the discoveries about Amelia's past, and the inconsistencies in the witness accounts had all begun to paint a disturbing picture. Ethan had been grappling with something far bigger than he had let on, something that had pushed him to the edge, possibly even to his death. Harrington sat at his desk, reading through the entries in Ethan's journal once again. Ethan's writing had become increasingly erratic in the weeks leading up to the wedding. One entry in particular stood out hauntingly clear. It doesn't add up. She's so careful, so practiced. How do you reconcile the person you love with the things you're uncovering? The words were heavy with doubt, yet they also revealed the extent of Ethan's internal struggle. He had known something that threatened everything he believed in, about Amelia, about his life, and about their future. It wasn't until Deputy Lewis uncovered more from Ethan's email records that the pieces began to fall into place. In the days before the wedding, Ethan had exchanged several emails with a private investigator named Franklin Myers. According to Myers, Ethan had hired him after noticing discrepancies in Amelia's financial records, particularly with regard to her business dealings and her inheritance from Jonathan Hayes. Myers explained that Ethan had come to him with suspicions about Amelia, unsure of what he was looking for but determined to get answers. As the investigation deepened, Myers had uncovered troubling details about Amelia's past, including her connections to shell companies and suspicious financial transactions linked to Jonathan's estate. Ethan had been devastated by the findings. Despite his heartbreak, Myers noted that Ethan didn't seem angry, but rather resigned, almost as if he had expected the truth to be far more sinister than he had hoped. The more Harrington learned, the more he realized how isolated Ethan had become. He had tried to protect Amelia, perhaps out of love, but also out of a desperate hope that he could fix whatever had gone wrong. He had kept his findings hidden from her, and it seemed clear now that his decision to confront her would have been inevitable. But why hadn't he confronted her before the wedding? And why had he chosen to disappear instead of confronting the truth? The breakthrough came when Harrington found surveillance footage from a coffee shop in Mystic. Ethan had met with Myers 2 days before the wedding, and the video showed a man weighed down by a deep sense of dread. He sat across from Myers, staring into space, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. Myers handed him a folder, and the footage revealed Ethan nodding slowly, absorbing the information that would ultimately tear apart his life. He seemed to be wrestling with a decision, though it wasn't clear whether he intended to confront Amelia or walk away from everything. Harrington studied the footage with growing concern. Something was off. Ethan had clearly been struggling with the truth, but there was no sign of any physical distress, no indication that he was planning to leave. Instead, he looked as if he was preparing for something far darker. The timing of his disappearance was becoming increasingly suspicious. Was Ethan running from something or someone? Was he trying to protect Amelia, or was he trying to escape the suffocating truth of her past? The next clue came from a gas station attendant in a neighboring town. The attendant recalled Ethan's visit the night before the wedding. Ethan had appeared tired, as though he hadn't slept in days, and had bought a bottle of water before leaving quickly. The attendant had a sense that Ethan wasn't just passing through. He was on a mission, heading somewhere, possibly far from Mystic. Harrington now had a clearer picture of Ethan's state of mind in the days leading up to the wedding. It wasn't just pre-wedding jitters. Ethan had been unraveling a painful truth about the woman he loved, and the weight of that knowledge had driven him to flee. But where had he gone? And why hadn't he confronted Amelia with what he had learned? Amelia's behavior during this time had also been a point of interest. Phone records revealed that she had tried to reach Ethan several times in the hours before the ceremony. The calls went unanswered, adding to the growing suspicion that Ethan had been deliberately avoiding her. But why? Had he been trying to protect her from the truth? Or was he afraid of what would happen if he confronted her? Ethan's journal, his final meeting with Myers, and the strange interactions with the gas station attendant all pointed to a man who had been running from something far beyond his control. He had discovered the truth, but it seemed that discovering it had come at a tremendous cost. The final piece of the puzzle came when Lewis discovered a hidden storage unit rented by Ethan months before the wedding. Inside, they found a duffel bag, a prepaid phone, and several envelopes of cash totaling over $15,000. The sight of the money was chilling. This wasn't just an escape, it was a planned departure, one that involved secrecy and preparation. The prepaid phone, without any saved contacts or call history, suggested that Ethan had been anticipating the need to disappear, to sever all ties with those he loved. Harrington stared at the contents of the storage unit, his mind racing. Ethan had known something was coming, something he couldn't escape, and he had made plans to leave. But why had he chosen to disappear instead of confront the truth? What had been so terrifying that he had chosen to vanish rather than face it? As the investigation continued, it became clear that Ethan's disappearance was more than just a personal crisis. It was part of something larger, something much darker. The truth, whatever it was, had cost Ethan his life. And now, the search for that truth was about to take a far more dangerous turn. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, but the more Detective Harrington uncovered, the more questions arose. Ethan Caldwell's disappearance was no longer just the tragic story of a groom running from his own wedding. The evidence suggested something far more sinister was at play, a conspiracy that had entangled not only Ethan, but also the woman he loved, and the people behind it were willing to do anything to protect their secrets. Harrington replayed the events in his mind, the unsettling discoveries, the cryptic journal entries, and now the evidence from the storage unit. Ethan had been planning something far beyond a simple escape from a wedding. The prepaid phone, the cash, the duffel bag, all suggested that Ethan had been preparing to leave Mystic for good. But why? And who had he been trying to hide from? The breakthrough came when Harrington reviewed the surveillance footage again, focusing on the grainy clip from the coffee shop. It showed Ethan meeting with Franklin Myers just days before the wedding. The conversation had seemed unremarkable at first glance, but Harrington noticed something new this time. After the meeting with Myers, Ethan had stepped outside and briefly spoken to a man in a dark hoodie. The exchange was quick, and the man's face remained obscured, but their interaction left Harrington with a gnawing suspicion. Was this stranger connected to Ethan's sudden disappearance? Was he part of a larger network that had been pulling the strings behind the scenes? The question weighed heavily on Harrington's mind as he instructed Deputy Lewis to trace any footage or leads related to this man. They had to find out who he was, and fast. The investigation took another turn when Lewis uncovered a disturbing lead. The hooded man from the coffee shop was caught on more surveillance footage, this time at a bus station in a neighboring town. The timestamp showed him arriving shortly after Ethan had left Seabreeze Manor on the night of the wedding. Harrington's instincts told him this man wasn't a coincidence. He was a critical part of this mystery. The more they dug, the more Harrington began to feel like they were being pulled into a deeper, darker web. The hooded man had made his way to a bus station, where employees recalled seeing him purchase a ticket to Boston. The urgency in his actions, the constant glances over his shoulder as if someone were following him, only added to the sense of something more dangerous unfolding. Was he fleeing from something, or leading them to something? But the most chilling discovery came when Harrington and Lewis traced Ethan's movements to a storage facility on the outskirts of town. Records revealed that Ethan had rented the unit under a false name, James Carter, 6 months earlier. The contents of the unit sent a jolt through Harrington. Inside, they found a packed duffel bag, several envelopes of cash, and a prepaid cell phone, much like the one found in the storage unit earlier. But the real shock came when they found a series of documents hidden in the back of the unit, documents that detailed a series of secret meetings, coded financial transactions, and the names of several individuals tied to Jonathan Hayes' estate. The papers painted a disturbing picture of a network of powerful figures involved in illegal activities that spanned across industries. The discovery was a breakthrough. Ethan had stumbled upon something far bigger than a simple case of financial fraud. Harrington's heart raced as he pieced together the significance of what they had found. Ethan had known something so explosive that it had driven him to leave everything behind. But what had he uncovered? And why had he gone into hiding instead of confronting Amelia with what he had found? The evidence from the storage unit also suggested that Ethan hadn't been acting alone. His contact with the hooded man, the cash, and the secret meetings pointed to a network of individuals who had been monitoring him, perhaps even manipulating him. The conspiracy was bigger than anyone had imagined, and Ethan had become a pawn in a game of power, deception, and betrayal. As the investigation continued, the pieces of the puzzle began to form a clearer picture, but the answers seemed further out of reach than ever. Whoever was behind Ethan's disappearance, and now his apparent death, had left nothing to chance. They had orchestrated everything, from Ethan's flight to the storage unit, to the carefully timed meetings with the hooded man. It was clear that the people involved were willing to go to any lengths to protect their secrets. But the deeper Harrington went, the more he realized that Ethan had been trying to expose something far darker, something that had ultimately cost him his life. The truth was out there, hidden in plain sight, but it was buried under layers of lies and deceit. And now, it was a race against time to uncover it before the people responsible could bury it forever. With each passing day, the stakes grew higher. Ethan's disappearance had been just the beginning, and now the investigation was entering dangerous territory. Whoever had orchestrated his flight, and now, possibly his death, was watching. And Harrington knew that the only way to get to the truth was to keep pushing forward, no matter the cost. The investigation had become a battle for the truth, and Harrington was prepared to fight until the very end. Detective Harrington's investigation had reached a boiling point. The deeper they dug into Ethan Caldwell's disappearance, the more dangerous it became. The trail had led to a remote cabin in the dense forests of Vermont, and although it seemed like a long shot, Harrington couldn't ignore the tip he'd received from an anonymous caller. If Ethan had truly been running from something, the cabin might hold the answers he desperately needed. The drive to the cabin was long and arduous, the road winding through thick trees and narrow paths. The air grew cooler as they neared the property, and Harrington felt a chill settle in his bones. The cabin, nestled in the Green Mountains, seemed to be the perfect hideaway for someone desperate to escape. Its weathered exterior and sagging porch gave the impression that it had been abandoned for years, yet something about the place felt recent, as though someone had been living there. As Harrington and Deputy Lewis approached, the silence of the forest pressed down on them. The cabin looked abandoned, but there was a sense that something vital had recently transpired here. They pushed open the door, its hinges creaking in protest, and stepped inside. The interior of the cabin was modest, yet there was a sense of life in the air. A small table held everyday items, a half-empty water bottle, a crumpled map of New England, and a single burner phone. A wood stove sat nearby, stacked with logs, though the ashes inside were cold, indicating the stove hadn't been used in a while. Harrington scanned the room carefully, his eyes landing on a duffel bag in the corner. He approached it cautiously, rifling through the contents. Inside, he found a change of clothes, a flashlight, and a notebook. The notebook caught his attention. It appeared to belong to Ethan. Its pages were filled with hurried notes, many of which mirrored the cryptic entries in his journal. One phrase stood out: "I have to disappear before it's too late." The room felt colder as Harrington absorbed the meaning behind those words. Ethan had been preparing to leave, to escape from something or someone, but what had been so pressing that he needed to vanish? Had he been in fear for his life? The discovery was unsettling, but it was only the beginning. On a shelf nearby, Harrington found a series of documents. Some were financial transactions, all pointing back to Amelia, her late stepfather's estate, the shell companies, and the connections to the powerful network that had been lurking in the shadows. But one photo caught his eye. It was a candid shot of Amelia, taken without her knowledge, standing with a man. Harrington's breath caught in his throat as he recognized him, the same hooded figure from the coffee shop footage. The realization hit him like a wave. Whoever had been tracking Ethan and Amelia wasn't just trying to silence them. They were watching them closely, waiting for the right moment to make their move. And now, Ethan had gone into hiding to escape them. Harrington's pulse quickened as he moved across the room to a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside, he found a small safe. He opened it, finding a USB drive and a handwritten note. The note, unmistakably written by Ethan, read, "If you're reading this, I didn't make it. I couldn't risk staying here any longer. The truth about Amelia is worse than I ever imagined, and it's tied to something bigger. I thought I could fix this, but I was wrong. If I've been found, it means they're already one step ahead. Please use what's on this drive to finish what I couldn't." Harrington's heart raced as he held the USB drive in his hand. This was the key, the evidence that could unravel everything. The truth was out there, hidden in plain sight, but it had come at a steep cost. Ethan had known the danger he was in, and now it was up to Harrington to finish what Ethan had started. As they prepared to leave, forensic analysis of the cabin revealed traces of a third person's DNA, someone who had been in close contact with Ethan shortly before his disappearance. The discovery of the DNA only deepened the mystery. Who was this person, and what role did they play in Ethan's decision to run? The cabin had provided answers, but it also raised more questions. Who was behind the conspiracy, and how far did their reach go? The deeper Harrington dug, the more dangerous the truth seemed. But he knew one thing for sure. Ethan had paid the ultimate price for uncovering it, and now it was up to him to finish the fight. The contents of the USB drive sent shockwaves through Harrington's mind as he watched the decrypted files. Ethan's final confession was on the drive, but what he hadn't anticipated was the sheer scope of the conspiracy it uncovered. The recording, grainy and shaky, showed Ethan sitting in a dimly lit room, speaking directly into the camera. His face was tired, worn down by the knowledge he had uncovered. It was clear he had been carrying a heavy burden, one that had torn him apart. Ethan's voice, shaky but resolute, began the confession. "If you're watching this, it means I'm either dead or gone. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I've discovered the truth about Amelia, about who she really is, and the people behind her. I didn't want to believe it, but it's worse than I ever imagined. What I've found is tied to a conspiracy that goes back decades, and it's far bigger than anything I could have anticipated. Harrington listened intently, his heart pounding as the truth unfolded. Amelia, or Clara Donovan as she had once been known, was not just a victim of circumstance. She had been entangled in a web of corruption, power, and deceit that reached to the highest levels of government and business. But what had drawn Ethan into this world was more than just his relationship with her. It was the dangerous secrets she had unknowingly inherited. Ethan continued, his voice heavy with regret. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Amelia wasn't just an innocent bystander. She's been pulled into this mess without even knowing it. But now, the people behind this network are watching us, and I'm afraid for both of us. If I'm gone, it means they've already gotten to me. Please don't let it go. Find the truth before it's too late. The weight of Ethan's words hit Harrington hard. Ethan had known the risks, and yet, he had chosen to expose the truth, even if it cost him his life. The conspiracy Ethan had uncovered involved illegal arms deals, money laundering, and a series of hidden transactions that connected the wealthy and powerful to Jonathan Hayes' estate. And at the center of it all was Amelia, unknowingly caught in the middle of a deadly game of power. The USB drive contained a series of encrypted files, each one more damning than the last. Names of politicians, business magnates, and other high-profile figures appeared, all linked to the secret dealings that Ethan had been investigating. Among them was a name that struck Harrington like a punch to the gut: Senator Thomas Harrington, his own uncle. The revelation hit Harrington like a freight train. His uncle, a man he had admired for years, was at the center of the conspiracy. The same man who had championed anti-corruption legislation had been part of the very network he had sworn to fight. The betrayal was personal now, and it changed everything. As the video continued, Ethan revealed the final piece of the puzzle: a set of coordinates that led to a remote island in the Caribbean. It was a hidden safe haven for the conspirators, where deals were made and power was brokered in the shadows. But more than that, the island had become the final battleground in a fight for control over the conspiracy's future. Ethan's final words were a plea for justice. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't let them silence me, and I couldn't let Amelia become another pawn in their game. Please find the island, find the truth, and bring them all down. Harrington sat back in his chair, stunned by the magnitude of what he had just uncovered. The conspiracy wasn't just about money or power. It was about control. And now the battle for the truth had reached a boiling point. The people responsible for Ethan's disappearance, and likely his death, were more dangerous than Harrington had ever imagined. They had killed to protect their secrets, and they would stop at nothing to keep them buried. But one thing was certain: Ethan had left a trail, and Harrington was determined to follow it, no matter where it led. The road ahead was dangerous, but the stakes had never been higher. The truth was out there, hidden in the files, in the confession, and on the island that awaited discovery. It was up to Harrington to find it before the people behind the conspiracy could bury it forever. The fight for justice was only just beginning. Ethan Caldwell's murder had pulled Detective Harrington deeper into a world of corruption and deception, where the line between right and wrong had blurred beyond recognition. The discovery of Ethan's body on the secluded beach in Southport confirmed the worst. Ethan had been murdered, his life snuffed out by the very people he had tried to expose. The forensic team had completed their analysis, confirming that the cause of death was strangulation. The water had concealed the true nature of the crime, making it appear as if Ethan had drowned. But the marks on his neck told another story. Someone had silenced him, someone who had feared the truth he carried. Harrington stood on the beach, staring at the cold, lifeless body of the man who had tried to uncover a conspiracy that stretched far beyond anything Harrington had imagined. The reality of the situation was sinking in. This wasn't just about a missing groom or a woman with a hidden past. It was about a network of powerful figures willing to kill to protect their secrets. And now, Ethan had become their casualty. The beach was deserted, the waves lapping against the shore in a muted rhythm. Harrington's mind raced as he pieced together the clues. Ethan had been running from something or someone who had been watching his every move. Whoever had orchestrated his disappearance and now his death was not acting alone. This was a coordinated effort, a carefully planned move to silence the threat Ethan posed to the conspiracy. As the body was taken for a full autopsy, Harrington's thoughts turned to the people behind Ethan's death. The names on the USB drive, the politicians, business magnates, and powerful figures who had been implicated in the conspiracy were still untouchable. But now, with Ethan dead, the stakes had shifted. The people responsible for his death were no longer hiding in the shadows. They were willing to kill to protect their secrets, and they were closer than ever. Harrington couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Ethan had died trying to uncover the truth, but his death had opened a new chapter in the investigation. It was no longer just about uncovering a conspiracy. It was about bringing those responsible to justice no matter the cost. The murder of Ethan Caldwell had torn open a door that many powerful figures had desperately wanted to keep shut. As the investigation deepened, the true scope of the conspiracy became clear. The people responsible for Ethan's death were not only involved in illegal activities, but had been manipulating the system for years, using their influence to cover their tracks and escape accountability. The contents of Ethan's confession, recorded on the USB drive, had exposed a network of corruption that stretched from the local level to the highest echelons of government. The revelations had sent shockwaves through the investigation, and now, with the murder of Ethan, the fight for justice had become personal for Harrington. Harrington reviewed the documents that Ethan had left behind, the encrypted files, and the financial records that tied the conspiracy together. The names were familiar, but the connections were more insidious than he had ever imagined. The conspiracy was far-reaching, involving money laundering, illegal arms deals, and covert transactions that had funded the operations of some of the most powerful figures in the country. But the most shocking discovery came when Harrington found a link between the conspiracy and his own family. Senator Thomas Harrington, his uncle, was at the center of it all. The man who had built a career fighting corruption was now implicated in the very conspiracy he had sworn to dismantle. The betrayal cut deep. Not only had Ethan been murdered to keep the truth buried, but now Harrington was forced to confront the fact that his own family was involved in the corruption. The pressure was mounting. The investigation had already exposed too much, and the people behind the conspiracy were growing desperate. They had already killed to protect their secrets, and Harrington knew they would do anything to keep the truth from coming out. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Harrington realized that he was in more danger than he had ever been before. But he couldn't back down. Ethan's death, the conspiracy, and the truth had to be revealed, no matter the personal cost. As the investigation gained momentum, the truth about the conspiracy began to unravel in ways that no one could have anticipated. The revelations from Ethan's USB drive had triggered a nationwide outcry, exposing a web of corruption that had stretched its tentacles into every aspect of government, business, and law enforcement. The public demanded accountability, and the pressure on those involved grew unbearable. The authorities were closing in on the high-ranking figures at the center of the scandal. Several prominent individuals were arrested, their names linked to the illegal activities that had fueled the conspiracy. But the true scope of the operation remained hidden, and those responsible for orchestrating it were still at large. Senator Thomas Harrington, once a respected public figure, was the first to be questioned. His involvement in the conspiracy was undeniable, and the media frenzy that followed was a reminder of how quickly power could slip away. The public was in shock. How could a man who had campaigned on a platform of integrity be involved in such a sprawling network of corruption? As the trial progressed, more names were uncovered. Business magnates, political operatives, and law enforcement officials who had all been complicit in the scheme. The network of corruption was vast, and the consequences for those involved would be devastating. The trial became a media spectacle, with every detail of the conspiracy laid bare for the public to see. Amelia, or Clara Donovan, found herself at the center of the storm. Though she had been exonerated of any involvement in Ethan's murder, her connection to the conspiracy had made her a key figure in the case. She had never intended for things to escalate this far, but the manipulation and deceit of those around her had caught her in their grasp. As the trial continued, Amelia was forced to confront the reality of her past and the role she had unknowingly played in the conspiracy. Despite the scandal, Amelia's testimony was crucial. She spoke about her past, her relationship with Jonathan Hayes, and the way she had been manipulated into the conspiracy without even knowing it. Her remorse was palpable as she recounted the events that had led to Ethan's death. She had loved him, but now it seemed that love had been overshadowed by the lies and betrayal that had defined their lives. The trial was over, But the scars of the conspiracy would never fully heal. The powerful figures behind the operation had been convicted, but the damage done to the public trust was irreparable. The revelations from the investigation had shaken the foundations of the country's political and business systems, and the fight for justice had taken its toll on everyone involved. For Detective Harrington, the case had been a turning point. The investigation had forced him to confront not only the darkness of the conspiracy, but also the darkness within his own family. His uncle, once a hero in his eyes, was now a criminal, and the betrayal had shattered his worldview. But despite the personal cost, Harrington knew that the truth had to come out. Ethan's death had not been in vain. Mystic, the town that had once seemed so idyllic, had been forever changed by the scandal. The residents who had once lived in peaceful ignorance were now forced to confront the truth about their community, their leaders, and their complicity in the corruption. The fight for justice had been long and painful, but it had ultimately revealed the ugly underbelly of power. Amelia, now living under the name Clara Donovan once again, had been forever marked by the events that had unfolded. Though she had been exonerated in Ethan's death, the damage to her reputation was irreparable. She had lost everything: her name, her business, and the man she had loved. But in the quiet solitude of her new life, she found a semblance of peace. The truth had been exposed, and though she would never escape the shadows of her past, she could begin to rebuild her life. For Harrington, the road ahead was uncertain. The betrayal within his own family had changed him, but it had also given him a new sense of purpose. He had seen the cost of corruption and the lengths to which those in power would go to protect themselves. But he had also seen the power of truth, the way it could cut through the darkness and expose the lies that held society together. As the sun set over Mystic, Harrington stood at the edge of a new dawn. The road to redemption was long and difficult, but it was a road he was willing to walk, no matter the cost. The fight for justice had only just begun. The story has been edited to ensure personal privacy and security regarding names and locations. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to see the latest and most thrilling family crime stories.